We're making an epoxy chart table. Let's go. Hi, I'm Joe, and welcome to Motor City Boat Werks. Let's get to work. All right, so today I'm working in the art studio, and I'm going to be working on the second experiment for using clear epoxy to make a epoxy chart inlaid table. And the first project was the one I did for my wife. I took her Lazy Susan and I coated it with the crystal clear epoxy, gave it a really nice finish. Now it's all glossy. She's eternally happy. And the second experiment is going to be, I'm going to be epoxying some charts onto my work desk that I use in my production studio for making the YouTube channel. And I have this large desk that is, it's basically a door on top of two sets of cabinets. It's about 7 feet long, and it just has a flat black surface. I want to put some nautical charts on it and kind of encase them in clear gloss epoxy. And West Systems Epoxy makes a special hardener that goes with their epoxy for doing these types of projects. Now, so this is a three-stage project in that, first I'm experimenting with my wife's Lazy Susan. The second step is I'm going to be building this desktop for my production studio. And the third project, the piece de resistance, is going to be the final cockpit dining table that I want to make for the Albin 27 pocket trawler. And I want to do a similar process where I take a teak tabletop and inlay some epoxy coated charts in it so it looks very nautical. It's going to should be quite an interesting looking feature for the boat. But to kind of work my confidence up, I'm going to go ahead and do this second project here, which is making my production studio desktop. When I first started the YouTube channel, I wanted to have a very large desk. It seems like I'm always piling things up on my desk while I'm editing on the computer, and I have a lot of papers and stuff, and I really need a lot of space to kind of spread everything out, and I needed a giant desk. But I didn't want to pay top dollar for something that I buy in a store or a huge piece of furniture, so I decided to basically build a desk by using a combination of IKEA rolling cabinets and then putting a basic flat door on top of it. And this is a simple door you can buy at a big box store. It doesn't have a hole cut in it. It's very lightweight. You can paint it or finish it any way you want. Now what I want to do is go ahead and put some nautical charts on the top of the desktop, the door. And then I want to encase them in clear fiberglass epoxy. All right, I'm out in the shop here. We're gonna go see if I can find some nautical charts. I think I have some here, a pile of them that I've been saving. We'll see if there's anything good in here that we can use. These look pretty great. Now, as usual, what I've got here is a small table setup. I like to use this material here. It's actually floor underlayment material. Like if you're putting down an engineered floor in your basement or something like that, this is the material they use for the vapor barrier, but I like it for doing epoxy and any type of glue or lamination work because nothing sticks to it, and it's real easy to clean up. So we've got a new coating set up on the table here, and the first steps are I have to take the nautical charts and I've got to coat them in something to prevent them from being damaged by the epoxy resin. Nautical charts, especially if you have old charts from back in the day, when I was first starting out getting into boats and stuff like that, nautical charts that you could get from the Coast Guard or from the National Oceanographic Service or wherever, these charts were made of a heavy duty paper, but they were not waterproof. And if they come in contact with any type of moisture, they will kind of warp. They won't necessarily smudge, but they do discolor. And we don't want that for the way the desktop is going to look. We want to coat them as something beforehand so that they kind of retain their color and vibrancy when we later on go ahead and epoxy them. Now this sounds kind of weird. You're going to put something on them, and how come that doesn't discolor them? Well, we're going to use a product called Mod Podge, which is like it's almost like the consistency of Elmer's glue, or perhaps some type of a very, very watered down, viscous sort of paper mache type of product. And you coat this on, you use it for various craft projects and what have you. You can use it on artwork, but you put the Mod Podge on the nautical chart, or on a baseball card, or on a certificate, or something like that, and it will kind of laminate the product so that it can then be encased in epoxy clear resin. So we've got our foam roller here with the very tight nap. This is like what you use to repaint your kitchen cabinets, your standard junk foam roller from the big box store. And this is what I'm going to use as a little bit of a paint pan. These things are fantastic little leftover pieces of packaging that you get sometimes if you go to the grocery store and you order like frozen fajita meat or any type of frozen carnita meat. They come inside these little plastic things, and I always save them up because they're great to use afterwards. Both sides of the chart have to be covered really well with this Mod Podge, and you hang it up and you let it dry overnight. And the next day you should be able to take the charts and affix them to your tabletop, your flat surface. And this is what you're eventually going to do your epoxy pour onto. If you're enjoying this episode, would you do me a favor? Hit the like button and maybe leave a comment below. I invite you to subscribe. And if you really want to help out the channel, well, please consider leaving a donation on Patreon. This channel would not be possible without your support. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some of the epoxy, West System epoxy, we're going to roll it on here, and then we're going to take the charts and lay the charts on top of that and kind of stick them down. Now I've prepared the charts by waterproofing them, or at least making them resistant to moisture by using the Mod Podge on them. They're dried and ready to go. We'll lay the charts down like this. We can overlap them however we like. We'll just put them on here in different sorts of setups, what have you, right? And then afterwards, we'll go back and trim the edges. And then the next step is we'll put a dam using clear tape around the outside here, and we'll do an epoxy pour on the top, which will actually create the epoxy top. I learned an important lesson from this. I originally used epoxy to attach the charts to the tabletop, and this would ultimately prove to be a problem. The epoxy is not quite sticky enough to really get a good smooth attachment, and the charts with their individual folds and imperfections, they kind of curled up, and when they overlapped, they weren't really smooth. This would prove to be a problem later on when I got ready to pour the epoxy. After the charts are affixed to the top of the countertop here, what I did then is went with a razor blade, went around and kind of trimmed the edges, get everything nice and ready to go. Now the next thing I'll be doing is I'll be using some clear packing tape, and I'll create an edge, a lip that goes all the way around the door and sits proud of the surface, maybe about a ½ inch or maybe a little more. And this will serve as a dam so that when I pour the clear epoxy onto the countertop, it will basically run up against the packing tape, and later on I'll be able to remove that once it's all cured and hard, and I can sand it down and finish polishing it, put a nice beveled edge on it. Once the charts are in place and everything's trimmed, it's time to begin pouring the epoxy. You might hear this referred to as a bar top pour. Basically, you mix up a batch of epoxy resin with the Special Hardner, you pour it on top of the tabletop, and then kind of spread it around to get even coverage. It will flow out and make itself level. The trick is making sure that you have enough epoxy. After you do the pour, there will sometimes be some bubbles on the surface of the epoxy, and you've got to get those out. I tried using a hair dryer set on low and then on high, trying to get the bubbles to pop and kind of go away. And the hairdryer just really wasn't cutting it. I really couldn't get it warm enough. So I switched to a heat gun and put it on high, but held it at a little bit of a distance from the surface. And then you can just see all of the air bubbles just kind of pop as they come in contact with the heat, and everything begins to smooth out real nice. Right here you can see the bubbles, see how they kind of pop and disappear, and the epoxy begins to flow all around. Today I'm going to sand the desktop here. We're going to put a little sand on the epoxy that we did, and then probably a second coat of epoxy just to fill in some of the low spots. It didn't quite level the way I wanted to, and we need to also sand the edge. It looks like we're gonna have to repaint the edge of the top here because the tape pulled off some of the paint, and also it looks like maybe some of the tape stuck to it. And epoxy leaked through. So we're gonna clean this up, and it'll be a little bit of work. And once we have it all sanded down, we'll go back and put another layer of epoxy on, this time using probably a brush, and we'll watch that kind of spread out and smooth across the top. So I learned a couple of lessons doing this bar top pour, and I think they're worth pointing out because it really highlights why I do these type of projects, something small, something a little bigger, and then get to the final project down the road. Because it's a learning process, especially when you're doing something that's kind of a new skill, you've never done it before, and you want to kind of learn all the ins and outs and make your mistakes on a lesser project before you get to your, final grand masterpiece. What I learned from this whole process is that, well, first, the paper, the chart, or whatever it is you're putting down on your tabletop surface, it's got to be very, very flat, and it really needs to be affixed to the surface very well. I used epoxy this time, thinking everything would kind of get glued in place, and it really was the wrong sort of adhesive to try and keep everything flat. I should have used something that was quite a bit more tacky that would have really held everything in place. There are several places on my bar top pour before I did the final pour that I felt like there were some bubbles underneath and maybe it had released from the surface. I should have used some type of a spray adhesive. I think that would have brought the paper down really smooth. The other lesson that I learned is that, initially when you coat your paper with whatever it is you're going to put on it, laminated or coated with Mod Podge or something like that, you need to make sure that the paper itself is flat and that any wrinkles or curves or curls to the paper, well, they're taken out so that the paper itself is really got a flat surface and can be attached to your tabletop really well. Because I didn't do these two things, my surface is a little bit uneven, and when I run my hand over it, and when I look at it in certain light, you can actually see the surface kind of undulating as it goes across. There are some spots, high spots, even though I sanded them down and did a second pour, it just didn't cover it. And this kind of brings me to the third point, which is if you're going to do this type of project, if you're going to do a bar top pour, you really have to have a lot of epoxy resin material. You got to have a lot to put down in order to get your thickness, maybe up to 1/4 of an inch. That usually you don't go beyond that. But in order to do a pour like this on a surface that's kind of big, basically 2.5 feet by say 7 feet, well, you got to have a lot of material, and this material is not cheap. So, I want to have enough to be able to do my next project, the cockpit table, which is only, say, 24, 27 inches square. Well, if I use all of it doing a better pour on this production tabletop, I won't have any resin. I got to buy a whole nother can for another $100 or more, because you're going to need the epoxy to go with the hardener. It's probably $200. And so I'm going to try and stretch the material to do it. It's a lesson to learn that you need a lot of clear epoxy, hardener, and the resin itself to do something that really looks smooth. Well, there you go. If you're new to the channel or you're just stopping by, you may notice that we do things a little bit different here at Motor City Boat Werks. We try to show projects for boat building that are a little bit unusual. And I like to show the actual steps of the process rather than just showing you time-lapse photography with a little bit of music. I think it's important to learn the lessons and some of the nuances of how these projects are done. And frankly, some of the difficult lessons that you've got to learn. This is real boat building, real boat restoration. I promise in part 3 of the epoxy chart table project, I will show you the actual cockpit table. But I'm in the process right now of sourcing all the materials and determining how I'm going to construct this thing. I don't want to make any mistakes like I've done before. It takes a little bit of time, but I promise you, the third part of this series will really be something you're going to want to see. If you have a question for me about this project or any of the projects that you see on the channel, be sure to drop me a note, leave a comment below, or you can contact me via Facebook, Gmail, or even Instagram. I want to thank all our subscribers, and I especially want to thank our Patreons, those of you who have decided to donate to the channel to ensure that I keep making episodes. It really does a lot to motivate me, and it assures me that someone out there, they get what we're doing. Thank you for stopping by. We'll see you next time. Stay motivated.
If you like these videos, please hit the subscribe button. These videos would not be possible without your support.